morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today on this glorious Friday? It sure does seem like spring has officially sprung. In fact, it sprang right into summertime. It is going to be rather warm today. But that's good because this is the last weekend in April. So that's what we're going to be doing with ourselves today. Excuse me. Now, I talked about YouTube a little while ago, how in the YouTube queue that I have kind of was plowing through it. And I wanted to ask today, one of the videos that really caught my attention, in fact, a series of videos, was all about certain video games that give you, the player, a lot of respect and lets you be a player of your own and doesn't tell you how to do whatever it is that is expected of you on how to do it. What I'm talking about here is, in particular, games like Theif and Morrowind. But in addition to that, Super Metroid and the original Legend of Zelda game. Are there any games that currently, Morrowind was, 14 years ago? So are there any games that are being developed now or were released recently that give you the same kind of, it's not exactly freedom, and because in many ways what you're doing, what those games do to you is very restrictive. There's no such thing as fast travel, so you don't have the freedom to just jump around wherever you want. You don't have an auto map in Thief. Breadcrumb trails and quest markers that show up on your screen and tell you exactly which direction to go. So in many ways, the games are more restrictive. So it's not exactly freedom. It's more like a realism within the world. And I've always described games should have that level of a realism. And I mentioned automap, and I probably shouldn't have, because Super Metroid also has an automap. But Super Metroid's automap, it basically just says, okay, you've discovered where you are and what rooms are around you. So automap's not a good indicator of something being free. However, quest indicators is. There's absolutely no reason why you, as a player, could not use an automap to kind of remember. In your own brain, you have your own automap. It's entirely internal. There's no HUD, but you can see right there where in your brain how you need to get from. Like, you think about getting from your house to work. That's all auto-mapped in your brain. So I can understand that. But what I can understand, outside of GPS, I suppose that's the thing. Sorry, I'm stepping ahead of myself. What I can't understand is how you could go to somebody and have them say, hey, I need you to go to this place. Basically, what you need to do is you need to take this road for about 20 miles and then turn, and then you're going to be at this place. And what you're looking for is this thing, and when you found that thing, go up to the third door and you'll be there. Okay, so you could GPS that and then put your phone right here, and your GPS navigation will take you exactly where you need to go. And that is the kind of breadcrumby type navigation or quest marker that I'm talking about, that I think kind of makes games extremely boring. Because rather than finding anything on my own, I'm just kind of following this dot. Not really paying attention to the world, I'm following a dot. So, are there any games that are in development now that are doing this? I love Dead Space. But the fact that all I needed to do to figure out which way to go was just push a button, and there was a line that told me where to go, meant that this is not an exploration game. This is a kind of immersive horror action game. And it was not immersive, and the world itself did not make a lot of sense. The ship that you're on was really laid out in a strange way that did not make any sense. And there was a lot of backtracking, but it wasn't, you have to go back and do this on your own. It wasn't like, Hexen or something where there's a nice hub world. Where you go to, if you ever played Hexen 2, that's a terrific game. Really, really cool. Especially the first hub. So it starts you out kind of outside this church, and you kind of wander around and you start flipping some switches, and it feels kind of, doomy. If you ever played the game Blood, the first objective is to kill some things and push buttons. Yeah, that's kind of what Doom was. Let's kill things and push buttons until we get to the end of this level, and then we'll go to the next level. Whereas Hexen sets you outside this church, and it feels kind of doomy, but then you're given this choice. You can go right or left. And normally, if you're given a choice, you can go right or left. You go one direction, and that's the way that the story takes you, and you go that way for a while. Whereas if you go the other direction, you're going to come up on a dead end really soon that maybe has a little reward for exploring. You get some extra ammo or some items or something like that. But not this game. Hexen, very soon in the game, very early in the game, has you going either right or left, and either way there's a huge amount of exploration, and either way you go, you're going to have to backtrack and go around the other way. There's some things over this way that you're going to need to get from over that way. And typically, either way, you're going to wind up going back and forth a couple of times, because there's some things you'll go this way, you'll get something, you'll go this way, it'll unlock something else, and then you realize you missed something, so you got to go back. So are there any, I don't even know how I came up on this. The Hexen's a hub world like that. So that's not, Dead Space isn't backtracking you that in that way, where you're backtracking on your own. Dead Space never tells you need to get back to engineering, and then has you go, and you have to go back to engineering on your own. If Dead Space tells you need to go back to engineering, typically there's a new way to get to engineering that you've never seen before, or something to that nature. So I do like Dead Space, but Alien Isolation was kind of the same way, although I never finished Alien Isolation. That's kind of the same type of thing, though. There's always a new way to go. And people hate backtracking, and I don't know why people think that backtracking is a bad thing. I can understand if the developer is using backtracking just to pad the game, to say, well, shoot, I developed this game, and to beat it really only takes 18 hours. People are going to criticize how short it is. Let me throw in a couple of quests where they got to walk really, really far. Yeah, that's cheap. Those are cheap quests. Cheap fetch quests. But I don't understand why backtracking is a bad thing. I mean, you backtrack the heck through Chrono Trigger. No one ever complains about that. Chrono Trigger, another really good example of games like that. Although that Chrono Trigger story is very linear, but it was also a JRPG that really, I mean, you could futz around as much as you wanted. It was very similar to the way Final Fantasy VII, after you get out of Midgard, it opens up. Chrono Trigger is very similar in that regard. And I can't think of any games that I've played since Morrowind that give you that kind of freedom. Outside of Thief, I can't think of a single game that gives you a map that does not have some kind of, what do you call it? Here, you are here button on it. Did you ever play Ultima 4? I played it for the NES and loved it. Ultima 4, I'm pretty sure, if I'm understanding correctly, you could get a map of the world, but the map never told you where you were on it. You needed to figure that out for yourself. But you could cast a spell, and if you cast a spell, it would tell you where in the world you were. But that spell was extremely expensive. In that game, in order to cast spells, you used reagents, and some of the reagents were very hard to come by, or were very expensive. So that's what I'm remembering in that regard. But outside of Thief, I think every other game gives you a map that is very thoroughly laid out, and kind of gives you all the details right at the bat. But in any event, if you can think of any games that are like that, that are in development now or have come out recently in the last 14 years, I'd love to hear about them. And as always, have a nice day.